Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So we're doing the follow-up video to my hot takes champions I'd like to nerf edition with champions I'd like to see buffed. We're going to try and structure it in the same format where we have some cold takes, some medium takes, and some hot takes. However, it's a little bit more subjective which category you might feel that these champions fit into. I'll categorize generically cold takes as champions you probably would agree with need a buff, but you may or may not agree with the buff itself. You can let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts on these champions and or my proposals for these champions. Medium takes are ones that you might or champions that you might not think even really needs to be changed, or you may agree or disagree with the buffs. And then hot takes are kind of where I get a little bit spicy on the champions, so you might not even think of that need buffs, but I think need buffs to counter certain things or to change certain things and how they work. So let's kick things off with the cold takes. There are going to be 3 champions in each category. So the first champion in the cold take category, meaning once again that you will probably agree that she does need a buff. Spoiler alert, she is in the Knights Revenant, and that would be Narma the Returned. Her current kit, really quickly, A1 here just attacks when enemy has a 60% chance of increase the duration of 3 random debuffs on the target. It's okay, but not really that great. She has a single target attack here that places decreased attack for 3 turns on a 3-turn cooldown, so that's kind of nice. Perma decreased attack, and it's it's a pretty sizable heal, but it's 15% of her max HP, and then heal will increase for poisons on the target, which of course synergizes with her A3 single target, 100% chance of placing 3 poisons and poison sensitivity for 3 turns on a single target on a 4-turn cooldown. So yeah, as written, very underwhelming. She's like barely better than a frozen banshee, which is a terrible description for, you know, a legendary. And so what I would like to do is start off by just making her A3 in AoE. I think it's somewhat balanced by the fact that I would leave it as a 4-turn cooldown, but you'd have 100% chance to place on an AoE 3 poisons and then poison sensitivity for 3 turns. So essentially it's Theodore plus a poison, but the difference is that it's on a 4-turn cooldown, so that might balance it a little bit. We'll see. Again, let me know your thoughts on these proposals. And potentially the more controversial one, and maybe a little bit more selfish because I do happen to have Norma, but on the A2, I would keep the attacks when enemy place decrease attack, but maybe I would say that when you attack the enemy, you place decrease attack across all enemies. So it's a single target attack, but you're also making it an AoE decrease attack. However, that might not matter, maybe because what I'd really like to see here is poison detonation. I would like her to be another poison detonation champion. So this ability would detonate poisons, and then the heal would increase for each poison detonated instead of increasing for each poison debuff on the target. So again, maybe you don't even need the decrease attack at all, because if you're popping all the poisons, presumably you're killing the waves. But you know, a lot of the champions who pop poisons do other things as well, so maybe you can keep that in there again, like I proposed, where you attack one enemy and you place AoE decrease attack, or just make it an AoE. Doesn't really matter one way or the other, but yeah, poison activation would be the goal there. So she would have a lot of poisons here, granted still on a 4-turn cooldown, but also a lot of poison, or a poison detonation on the A2. And then for the A1, honestly, I don't really have an idea of what to change it to, because obviously for popping all the poisons that she places with her A2, this doesn't really matter. You're not going to have that many poisons left over. So I don't know, leave it up to Plarium, assuming they do the first 2 to come up with something cool for the A1 that would make more sense and synergize with the direction of my proposal for the A2 and the A3. The next champion from the cold take section is going to be from the High Elves, and she should be, like, on paper, you look at her kit and you think she should be great for hard mode Fire Knight, and yet she's absolutely not, and that is going to be Shiramani. So Shiramani, as written here, she has her A1 3 times at random, has a 25% chance of placing a freeze, but unfortunately this is just a 25% chance of placing a freeze. It is not on each hit, meaning that if you attack the same target, you will only get 1 credit for 1 freeze on that 25% chance. So it's not like Neldor or Crowd in the blue. On the A2, it's a pretty serviceable heal. You heal 1 ally by 50% and all allies by 20% of their max HP, and then you place a 15% continuous heal buff on all, or for targets with full HP, which is kind of weird, because if they're full HP, they probably don't need a continuous heal, but I digress. And then lastly, we have the A3 here, AoE attack, 100% chance when booked of placing an AoE freeze for 1 turn, and it fills their turn meter for each attacked enemy. So essentially what I would want Shiramani to be, because there's not really an equivalent, is she should be the legendary Crowd in the blue. So what I would do first is I would make her A3 here a double hitter. So you have 2 100% chances to place a freeze, which in most cases doesn't really matter, because you're going to place it on the first hit, but in terms of utility for Fire Knight, she would be more reliable than Cryoden's AoE, where I think it's like a 65% chance across 2 hits, or maybe that's too high. Maybe you make it 85% chance across 2 hits to place the freeze, whatever, something high enough that it's reasonable that she'll place 2 freezes more often than not. For the A2, again, with hard mode Fire Knight kind of in mind here, I would keep the heal roughly the same, but before healing, I would say that she restores a portion or fully restores destroyed max HP, again countering what hard mode Fire Knight can do to you, and then keep the heal as it is. And then honestly, just as a bonus, I would say you place the contingent heals on targets without full HP, because again, I think it's a little bit redundant. If they're full HP, then why do they need the heal? So put it on allies or targets with less than full HP. And then lastly, just make her A1, place the freeze on each hit, make this like the super Cryoden. So maybe a 40% chance. Cryoden when booked is 35, so maybe 5% more, because she's a legendary, she should be better than an epic. And so 40% chance of placing a freeze on each hit 3 times at random stays, and then she's a god for hard mode Fire Knight, like it seems like she should be when you read her kit. And then the last champion for the cold take section is from the Banner Lords, and we're hopping over to the Void legendary category. You probably guess who it is with that mention, but it is of course Raglan, the champion whose kit when you read it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, at least when it comes to the A2, and that is primarily where I would try to fix her. Honestly, I like her A1. She's, it's a triple hitter, which is good, but it also gives a decent amount of turn meter across different allies. This is one of the best single target revives in the game. It's a 2-turn cooldown, a relatively high HP, 75%, and a full turn meter. It's not a cardinal thing, so it's not max turn meter, but it is pretty high. I don't think I would want to give her max on a 2-turn cooldown, but still very, very solid. Lots of turn meter effects between these 2 abilities. And then we come to the A2, and it just kind of falls apart. It's a full cleanse and a heal, but the heal is proportional to her attack. She is, of course, a support champion, so you're not going to want to build her with a ridiculous amount of attack. You want to build her to be a support, high HP, high speed, maybe even high resistance. So going along with the theme of turn meter filling on the A1, or effective turn meter filling on the A3, I would add some turn meter fill to this. So 20% or 30% turn meter fill. Keep the full cleanse. We don't have to add block debuffs here, and because this is, to make it Torment proof, so to speak, the turn meter fill would happen before the cleanse. That way you're not cleansing and then turn meter filling, and therefore you get frozen from the turn meter fill. And then she would heal everyone by 20% or 20% to 30% of her max HP. So they can kind of pick a number. 30% would match Wither the Crowned, which maybe is not good enough because Wither the Crowned is a non-void legendary, but Marichka the Unbreakable has it at 40%, so we can match it at 40%. You can put it at 35% to be a little bit worse than Marichka. They are in the same faction after all, but something proportional to her max HP is kind of the main thing here, instead of it scaling off of her attack, which obviously makes no sense. All right, moving on to the medium take champions, a new set of 3, and again, these are champions who you probably don't think need a buff, but in my opinion, they're close to being really, really good compared to where they are right now. The first champion on this list is going to be from the Barbarians faction, and she is a very serviceable Hydra champion, but I think with a little bit of a tweak, she could be even more reliable when it comes to Hydra specifically, and that is going to be, of course, Contra the Cyclone. The only thing I would realistically change here is mostly the passive, and it's just that little bit of text there at the bottom. It has a 75% chance to place a provoke on enemies for 1 turn when they're under 4 or 5 or more debuffs. So there's a couple of things that I would kind of like to see here, and Plarium could kind of mix and match if they were to actually embark on this. I would say maybe increase this to 80% chance just to make it a little bit more reliable. You can have it, when it's decrease this to 4 or more debuffs, or you can say, place a 1 turn if they're under 5 or more, or 1 turn if they're under 3 or more debuffs, and then make it a 2-turn provoke if they're under 4 or more debuffs or 5 or more debuffs, but something like that. So essentially she can place provoke on a passive for 1 turn or for 2 turns depending upon the number of debuffs, and obviously the harder to achieve thing, let's say 5 for example, would be the threshold for it to be a 2-turn duration provoke. So that would be excellent, and it should be much, much better, more reliable, and much better at locking down the Head of Decay. And I know a lot of people would probably want, her to have more reliability on the A2. I think it's kind of okay as it is, but maybe they could trade, increase the chance. I mean, it's 75% chance, so it's pretty darn high, but maybe trade, remove heal reduction and trade that for like 5% higher, so 55% base, 80% chance when booked. Something like that would be pretty nice. Next up, kind of following the theme of Hydra adjacent champions, let's go into the Skinwalkers and talk about Mighty Uko, who used to be very, very strong in the arena meta back when you could place stuns on both of his both of his hits on the A2. But quickly going through his kit, he has the revive here with block damage on a 4-turn cooldown, but you can use it when allies are not dead, which I find extremely annoying. We'll come back to that a bit later, but it will also place increased speed. And then this is the 2-time hitter buff removal ability that will place block buffs and decrease accuracy, but only if the targets have no buffs after the attack, which is a huge problem when it comes to Hydra, because of course heads respawn with Serpent's Will, meaning that you cannot place block buffs when they spawn, which is practically when you need it the most. And then lastly, on the A1 here, AoE attack that places decrease attack. So his changes pretty darn simple. I would just make his A3, and again, you might disagree, you might like having the flexibility to just put increased speed on your champions, but I would make this a pure revive. So you get rid of the last sentence. It's essentially whenever someone dies, he will revive them with 40% HP, block damage, and increase speed on all allies, and block damage on the ally who died, or all allies. It doesn't really matter, one of the two. But just make it a pure revival. That way on auto, you don't have to worry about pausing your run or hoping that he revives at the wrong time, or just leaving it on and he wastes it when no one's dead. And then when your team wipes the next turn after he uses it, and then it's on cooldown for 3 more turns, and then you die because he couldn't get back to it fast enough. Stuff like that is very, very annoying. And then of course we're going to change the A2 as well. Just get rid of that last little sentence. Just have him do the buff strip and then place block buffs and decrease accuracy. Doesn't matter if they don't have any buffs or they have 1 buff left, 2 buffs left, regardless, just place the block buffs and decrease accuracy. That would make him so much better for Hydra. And then lastly, for the medium takes, we're going to hop over to the Sacred Order. We have the long forgotten AoE block damage champion, and that is Roshkard the Tower. As written right now, he just has 4-turn cooldown, 2-turn block damage, which is pretty par for the course when it comes to the AoE 2-turn block damages. He has a chance of removing a buff on the A1, and then he has a single target attack, block active skills, and block buffs for 2 turns, and they cannot be resisted. So pretty simple for me, just because he's definitely the weakest of the AoE block damage champions. Helikath has a lot more things in his kit, the increased defense, the shield, he does decent damage, weaken on the A1, the counterattack passive, very, very solid. And then I think Alsgore Crimsonhorn has like a full heal with the block damage. He has the decreased speed potential when you would hit him on his passive and stuff like that. So I don't know if Roshkard needs to be as strong as those two, but honestly, all I would like to see is just make his A2 an AoE attack. So an irresistible AoE block active skills on, maybe you book this to, or increase it to a 5-turn cooldown, book down to 4, because that's pretty powerful. But yeah, you don't build it with any accuracy. You maintain that in this kit, but AoE block active skills for 2 turns and block buffs, and it'd just be an AoE attack. Debuffs can't be resisted, 4-turn cooldown when booked. And I guess just to continue with the theme of not building it with any accuracy, then maybe keep the A1 the same, but just have it have a chance to irresistible chance to remove a buff from the target, stuff like that. So you build him with high speed, high resistance, or something like that, and then he just has 2 irresistible abilities, and he can function more as a protection champion here on this ability, and also a CC champion AoE onto the A2. All right, so now we move on to the hot take. So these are buffs for champions that you probably don't even think need to be touched. Let me know again in the comment section down below if you agree. But regardless, the changes I'm proposing might be a bit more on the controversial side. So we'll start off with kind of the most egregious of, not to bury the lead here, the most egregious of the proposals would be for the demon spawn. So controversial, I know, but I would like to see a buff to Mortu Macabre. Now keep in mind that Mortu Macabre would still maintain his position as the boss in campaign. So everything I'm saying, keep that in mind with a grain of salt. But Mortu Macabre, I want to turn this guy into the Marius counter that currently does not really exist in the game. Maybe Empress a little bit, because you can kind of switch forms and then you HP swap if you survive, and then you can do some damage. But yeah, I would like to rebuild Mortu into the Marius counter. So I would change this passive here, Fiery Rage, such that it will unlock Peril automatically when you take 3 hits of damage. So that could, again, countering with Marius in mind, he does the triple hitter, you somehow survive, maybe your Mortu's in Stone Skin, whatever it is, or he's in reaction. You hit him 3 times and then Peril is unlocked. But not just that. Instead of having the chance to fill his turn meter, when you hit him 3 times, and from any source of damage, you hit him 3 times, it will fully cleanse him, boost his turn meter by 50%, and then unlock Peril, so that you can come into here, attack one enemy 2 times, ignore the shield and block damage, as well as the defense, and with the block revive. But not just that, I would add also ignores Stone Skin. So it will punish teams that, just run Marius and kind of just, bop, bop, bop and try to kill everyone. And also whoever might be hiding under Stone Skin, your nuker, your second nuker, or whatever. Nope, this guy will also ignore Stone Skin, so he can be much, much more scary. Now, again, when you're going against him in campaign, this is going to be a lot more annoying. So maybe the Peril in this case would have, a 1-turn cooldown just to make it balanced. So it's, 3 hits, but once he gets the turn unlocking Peril, then he will, it'll reset and it will start the hit counter once he gets a turn or after he uses Peril. But yeah, definitely know if you'd like to see that change on Mortu, specifically more so in the arena, but also bearing in mind that he would maintain some of these capabilities in campaign as the final boss. So while we're in here, I might as well fix his other abilities, and I do mean fix, but his A2 here, just make it scale off of HP. Duh, he's HP based. Why is there attack in here? Same thing on the A1, it's based on attack. Doesn't make any sense. He's an HP based nuker. Make it scale off HP. Again, in campaign, as an enemy combatant in waves, that means he would hit a lot harder because his HP is going to be is way higher than his attack, obviously. So just keep that in mind. Doom Tower waves, his A2 and his A1 would hit a lot harder if those tweaks were made to his multipliers. Going along with a similar vein of countering somewhat meta champions, let's go over to the Sylvan Watchers and talk about the champion that had such potential but definitely fell flat, and that is Quilcha, the Ash Arrow. Really simple fix. This guy was meant to be, on paper, he's meant to be the Armand's counter. Just read the passive and you kind of understand. Whenever this champion's turn meter drops to 25%, because of a turn meter reduction effect from an enemy, places block debuffs, i.e. you would prevent the stun from landing on you from an Armand's, and you would block debuffs for 2 turns, and then you would grant him an extra turn, which is more so an instant turn, but it doesn't really matter how you want to think about it. But essentially you would cut in after an Armand's took all of your turn meter, and you would block the stun with block debuffs. And then the passive effect here is that whenever this champion's or an ally's turn meter is decreased, i.e. Armand's steals turn meter from your entire team, it will increase the damage of this champion's next attack by 20%, stacks up to 100%. So in arena context, you have 4 enemies or 4 allies, or 3 allies on your team. He steals turn meter from everyone. That means you would do 80% more damage on your next attack, which of course you'd go into with this ability here, Falling Leaves. Attacks an enemy 2 times. If the initial target is killed, it also attacks the enemy with the lowest HP, i.e. the nuker, so to speak. Now, as strong as this ability is, innately ignores 50% of the target's defense, meaning you put this with Savage and Helm Smash and you could potentially ignore 100% defense. It also ignores unkillable and block damage, but in a lot of cases, and just the way the game works, Armand's are going to be in Stone Skin, potentially 2-turn Stone Skin, so he sucks all your turn meter away and he's still sitting there under Stone Skin, and Armand's is the fastest champion on the team, meaning that whoever else might be in Stone Skin, you can't really do any damage to them either. So this kind of just goes into nothing. Maybe you can kill Armand's if he's in 1-turn Stone Skin, but you can't kill anybody else because the entire rest of the team is in Stone Skin. So you're kind of guessing where I'm going here, but yeah, change to the A2, ignores unkillable, ignores block damage, and ignores Stone Skin. I would love to see more ignore Stone Skin abilities in the game on top of the 50% defense. Keep that in. I don't think that's necessarily overpowered because this is a single target attack. It's not a block revive or anything crazy like that, but you just essentially, Armand's takes a turn, sucks your turn meter away, you get a bunch of extra damage from the passive part of the passive. The active part procs, you get the instant turn, you come in here, you kill Armand's and potentially one nuker who's just hiding there slowly under Stone Skin. The rest of the kit, honestly, I would keep the same. This is a pretty decent AoE attack. If he kills someone, he gets unkillable on himself, so he does have a little bit of self-preservation, and then he puts increased crit damage on himself when he attacks on the A1. Now, the last champion is someone who you might think is perfectly fine as she is, but I think she could be a little bit better, but potentially a little bit more broken, depending on how you want to interpret it. But she is from the Demon Spawn, and she is a, free to grind, free to obtain champion eventually, and that is, of course, Authoritrix Lammasu. Really fun champion to use for sure. Really fast, good speed aura. She has this, she's infamous, I would say, for her single target cleanse. Intercept stacks for 2 turns, or 2 intercept stacks, and then fully resets the target skills and a 50% turn meter fill. So kind of like a mini Shuzen type ability here with the turn meter fill, but also the reset of like Ancora or similar like champions. AoE attack on the A1 with decreased attack, and then this ability, the A2, block buffs and True Fear for anyone who's not a boss. But if it's a boss, instead of True Fear, you place decreased speed. So the only thing I would change here is improve the A2 by just adding a little bit bit or a little bit of text here that says strips all buffs and then places her debuffs. So think of like Queen of Hearts comes to mind. We don't have the cut in passive, so you still have to worry about that per se. But because she is notably immune to sheep debuffs, I think that would be more than fair, but honestly just kind of interesting, more so in the meta, that you can have a cool, maybe a different type of build. Maybe you build her in Supersonic. Probably people are going to build her in Stone Skin, but you put her in something different than what you normally see. She's immune to sheep. You come in here with however you get there. You're either a Go First team or a Supersonic team. She comes in, strips all your buffs off, places block buffs. That way you can't buff afterward, and then True Fear across your team for 2 turns. I think that would be fantastic for a change to her kit, and she would still maintain her boss presence where she places block buffs and decrease speed, but you'd still benefit from the potential to strip buffs there before placing block buffs, and it would still not be an attack, so you don't have to worry about affinity. She's void affinity anyways, but it wouldn't be an attack. You preserve that, and so it would just be stronger, because so many times you want to use this ability and the enemies might have block debuffs up or something else, and then she just doesn't do anything. It's kind of a bummer, and so the table almost has to be set for her by someone else stripping off buffs or just making sure that there's nothing left. So that would be great. You have a chance to remove Stone Skin or any other buffs out there, and so I think that would just be a nice buff to her. But again, she's a pretty popular champion as she is, so maybe you might think that she's kind of fine as she is, but who would complain maybe about having a more powerful, free to obtain champion? So yeah, there is my short list for 9 champions that I would like to see buffed, categorized into cold takes, medium takes, and potentially hot takes. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you agree with? Who do you think would be too overpowered, or who would still be too underpowered with any of the changes that I suggested? Or what are your changes that you would suggest for these champions, one or all of them? Let me know in the comment section down below. As always, if you did enjoy this video, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel, and feel free to hit the subscribe button down below as well for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.